Crystal Tower Information Whiskey 21530 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on Oak Tower, roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Departure 71143, flying flight, runway 28 left, switch takeoff, left 10 southbound.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure, every flight.
What is going on, everyone? Jim here with the Flying Midwest podcast. So happy you're able to join us. On this episode, join Maddie and I as we talk to the crew of the Super Guppy in another live from Airventure 2023. We learn more about this unique aircraft and what it takes to fly it. So strap in and let's take off into this special Airventure edition of the Flying Midwest podcast. Well, welcome everyone to a special live from Airventure edition of the Flying Midwest podcast. I am Jim.
Hello,
and
Jim.
joining me is Maddie.
Hello.
As always. So we're going to talk about something pretty unique on this episode. It's a Super Guppy. Do you want to say anything about the Super Guppy?
Yeah, but what kind of transition was that?
I don't know. It wasn't one.
No.
Where were we? We did the hi.
You said a sentence. You declared that it was special, which is true. This is a special episode of the Flying Midwest podcast. Not only was it recorded at OSH, but we got the opportunity as media to speak with two very important people. Two people responsible for the flight of the Super Guppy, which is a very unique aircraft.
That's right. We talked to one of their mission pilots, Brett Pugsley, and a flight engineer, Nelson Reyes. They took some time to sit down with us up on the flight deck of the Super Guppy, which was a cool experience in and of itself to be able to be up on the flight deck and just see it's an airplane on the inside of it. And
it sure is.
As unique as that aircraft is, it takes a crew to make that happen and to fly that unique airframe, and all those parts come together for hopefully successful flights.
So everybody sit tight, grab your popcorn, and let us welcome Nelson and Brett.
My name is Nelson Reyes. I am a NASA flight engineer flying the NASA Super Guppy.
So what is the mission of the Super Guppy? I know that a lot of people have seen photos of it and seen it around, but what is the mission of this aircraft?
Support the United States of America going back to the moon is our mission. Going back to the moon and then to Mars after that.
Okay.
So that is our directive, and we support that in many ways. Moving the Orion heat shield. We do move other aircraft from Department of Defense agencies, but our mission for NASA is let's get back to the moon and then eventually to Mars.
So with the Super Guppy, what is your role as a flight engineer for this aircraft?
My role, so the Super Guppy is a legacy airplane, and a lot of the modern equipment that you would find in traditional airplanes we don't have. So because this is a oversized aircraft, all the flight controls are fabric. So we have fabric flight controls. If you get a chance to go out there and you look, you'll see the elevators fabric, the ailerons are fabric. So, because they're very large and they're very heavy, so there's no hydraulic assist at all for our flight controls. So the pilot has to fly the airplane with cables only.
Wow.
So that requires two hands. So one many aspects of a flight engineer, he has to control the power throughout the whole phase of flight, from takeoff to cruise to landing. So Super Guppy, we have a second pair of throttles where the engineer controls the power throughout each phase of the flight. The pilot will call out torque torque 5, torque 4. Engineer would set, we'll call it, respond, torque 5, torque 4, and set that power. At times you would call just a little bit more power, start walking and walk back a little power. So the communication between the pilot and the flight engineer is absolutely essential, because he literally has a handful of airplane on the fly. So on top of that, I have my responsibility. One of my responsibilities as a flight engineer is monitoring the health of the aircraft. My panel here, I monitor my engines. I have 4 engines out there. I have my fuel flow, my TAT, temperature, how hot they are burning, how much power they're putting out, oil pressures, how cool they are. I call this my engine stack. So I'm constantly looking at my engine stack to make sure that my engines are operating optimal, to make sure that they're working fine. And I also have all my anti-ice systems. I have my electrical systems I have to keep track of, my DC power, AC power, as well as my fuel. I also manage the pressurization to keep us from getting hypoxic. And that's important. Yes. That's important. Make sure that that the crew stays healthy. So I'm very, very busy. On top of all that, and managing those systems, because the airplane has such a huge drag index, what that is it's something, an additional amount of drag that's outside of the airplane. This number is not known, but it's computed into a performance book. So we can't necessarily use computers to compute takeoff performance. We can't use computers to compute how much runway we need, or to compute what the climb that we need to achieve to clear this obstacle that's out there on the field. So the engineer runs all performance by hand. Wow. And so, for example, if we are doing a high power takeoff, I would go here to 1077. I will compute my torque at our pressure, altitude, and temperature. I will get a torque. My second segment, I would have to compute to see what our climb gradient is. It has to be above our total gross weight, or we can't make that takeoff. Our final segment as we start climbing out. And then most importantly, how much the runway available. I compute this to see how much of a runway do we need to take off. Sure. So I come up with the number 6,000 feet. Hey, pilot, we need at least 6,000 feet to take off. If the runway is 5,000 feet, we're not going to want to take off in that runway.
Sure.
It would be very bad. And I've doubted myself many times, because it seemed like we were kind of going really slow, and I'm just counting down the numbers. Sure. We're still on the ground. I'm waiting, and I admit, the thought has popped up in my head, boy, I hope I didn't miss a line somewhere. Yeah. And so it's very critical and it's very important, right? So all this is all done by hand. Our climb, our endurance, our landing, our descent, all these are done by hand. So the flight engineer is very, very busy. Yeah. Very essential for this airplane, because of those factors I had just mentioned to select the airplane. We don't have computers. Emergency procedures is another big thing. A flight engineer is the responsible individual running emergency procedures. No one else responsible other than flight engineer, so he has to know the emergency procedures. Again, a modern airplane, for example, if you had a fire in number 2 engine, we would get a fire light. On a modern airplane, that airplane will direct its agent to that engine. It will shut down that engine. It will parallel the electrical system, electrical generators, and set all that up, all automatically. This airplane, you just get to fire. It is up to the flight engineer to make sure we put agent in that engine, make sure we shut down that engine, make sure that the fire is out. If it's not, put another bottle of agent into that engine. since there's no engine after it's shut down, it's not burning any fuel. I have to manage the fuel to make sure it stays in balance. I don't want to be heavier on one side or the other side.
Yeah.
If we shut down an engine, a big thing we compute is now we're down on 3 engines. What's our ceiling? As before on 4 engines, we were able to maintain 18,000 feet, but now on 3 engines, we're only able to maintain 14,000 feet. Is this good? Well, is there any obstacles that are 15,000 feet? The engineer is responsible to kind of look way out the road, and do I need to dump fuel? If we do need to dump some fuel, I'll go in and get rid of some fuel. And when I do that, I want to make sure it's not on the side the fire is at. So I want to be cautious and want to dump fuel on the other side and not make things worse. So there's a lot that goes into flying so to speak, a dumb airplane versus flying a modern airplane where a lot of things kind of happen by themselves in the background.
Sure.
So I think the biggest thing is communication, really, really good communication between the pilot and the flight engineer. And the flight engineer needs to be really kind of on top of it, just kind of fortunately, our flight engineers are all experienced. I'm a C-130 flight engineer, my second flight engineer, the P3 flight engineer. It's just him and I that currently fly the Guppy. So we're all very, very seasoned, very experienced.
So how often do you fly this? How often does it fly?
So it flies about almost 200 hours a year. So we fly like 2 or 3 times a month. If not a mission, we'll fly currency flying. Okay.
Yeah, I guess there's no simulator for this, is there?
We use the P3. You're absolutely right. There is no simulator for this. So we use the P3 simulator in NAS Jacksonville. Okay. And again, that works for us because the majority of our training comes from. You mean, what exactly, how much power do you want me to wipe off when you say just a little bit of power? All right, is this a little bit or is this a little bit? Like, what do you, and could you speak up a little bit? Because I'm behind you. And that you can really do in a box, so. And that's why that works for us, because the biggest part of simulator training is just working out these communication issues, these personality issues, running an emergency procedures, arguing, just kind of working that out versus actual aircraft systems. So yeah, that's a great question.
A1, right?
What is the biggest difference for you from going from like a C-130 flight deck to the Super Guppy?
Going from military, working with the military crew, it's very checklist oriented. You don't use first names. You close out a checklist, you start a checklist. You start a checklist by calling checks and pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, complete, and so it's very step-by-step oriented. Altimeter settings 0031, pilot 0032, co-pilot, engineer will verify. Yeah, that's the altimeter settings. So flying the Super Guppy is civilian for NASA, not so much. It's really kind of goes a lot on trusting, each other's ability to know what they're doing and doing their job.
Okay.
And we call each other by our first names: Ray, Pugs, Dave. And that was something a little bit to get used to. That very, very lax in the cockpit for the reason that I'm trusting you that you are going to do what you need to do to keep us alive. They're able to just focus on, the pilots are able to focus on flying the airplane and not worry about systems that should be taken care of. And so it's really kind of that type of thing. And that took a lot to get used to. It really did. It took a lot to get used to. As far as the airplane itself, The engine limitations are identical to the C-130 and P-3.
Okay.
They're the same engines. Except I don't set power in the C-130. I'm doing I'm monitoring and running emergency procedures and backing the pilots up. So I think a C-130 is definitely less hands-on in terms of flying the airplane, versus this is very, very hands-on. A bad landing is a combination of the pilot and the flight engineer, versus a bad landing in C-130 is pilot.
Sure.
Right?
So speaking of bad landings, I have to ask. I just have to. So I saw a video from the EAA posted of you guys coming in and landing. So everybody's like, oh, he didn't flare. What was that? Is that something that you guys, is that normal?
Yeah, that's normal. Typically, we like to set down on 3 points.
Okay.
But if we're setting down on 2 points, like traditional airplane, very rare, maybe on a no-flap landing, but you'll scrape up your tail cone back there. So I would say a good portion of the time we'll set down 1 point on the nose, and then because it's an overwing, the engines are over the wing. You got that overwing lift. She literally wants it. She doesn't want to come down. You have to force her to land. When we land, it is literally stay down. The yoke is pushed forward, and it's like stay on the ground.
Yeah, because I noticed when you came in, obviously you were on airspeed because you came down, touched down, and then you stayed. So it's not like there was no bouncing happening.
Yeah, we gotta force her because it's just there's so much area, wing area, that she'll just go back up.
Okay. Interesting. Well, all those weirdos are like, hey, all right, one last question. Unless Jim, do you have something?
Go ahead. I don't have any more.
What is the newest upgrade on this aircraft, and do you like it?
All right, so newest upgrade is the avionics, and I do like it. We have the FMS system, and we have a HSI. We still have the old school ADI, but we have HSI.
Very nice.
We have a VSI instead of the old vertical indicator. So it's nice to have these things upgraded into the airplane. So I'm looking forward to more upgrades when that comes along. So
that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's good talking to you guys.
Yeah, it was good talking to you too.
Brett Pugsley. I'm the operations branch chief at the Aircraft Operations Division in the Johnson Space Center at Ellington Field in Houston, Texas. That's a long title. It's a long title.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm losing my voice. So.
Oh no, you're all right.
Yeah.
We'll be gentle then.
Yeah.
So you're one of the pilots of the Super Guppy as well,
yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay. Tell us about your role with the aircraft.
Well, I'm a pilot, so I'm also one of the aircraft commanders. We have 3 aircraft commanders. We have a total of 5 pilots at Ellington Field. So, primarily we are, as the aircraft commander, we run our small detachments when we leave. So we'll leave Ellington Field or El Paso because this plane, it lives in El Paso. That's where the maintainers work on it. But all the air crew are out of Ellington Field. I'll run a detachment. We'll have up to 9 people on board, and we'll fly to some location, pick up a piece of cargo, move it across the United States, get it there safely, offload, and then bring the plane back to El Paso. So that's generally what our missions are like. The type of stuff that we move, I'm sure you've already heard. It's been, space equipment, whether it's parts of spaceships or it could be even other kind of space type loads. We've brought up pieces of the International Space Station when they're building it. We'd fly from different parts of the United States when they got built, manufactured, bring it to the Kennedy Space Center. They'd throw it on the space shuttle and then send it up to orbit.
Wow.
Built the space station.
So how long have you been flying?
So I've been flying since 1997. Yeah, forever. Since 1997, I've been flying. So I did 20 plus years in the Navy flying F-18s.
Okay.
I did a test pilot stint there, and then got out, and then joined NASA, and I've been flying with NASA for about 5 years.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you been flying this the whole time, or?
Yeah. So I got 5.5 years ago, I got to NASA, and then about half a year into flying, I jumped into the Super Guppy as a co-pilot.
Oh, that's awesome.
So about 5 years on her.
Okay. You liking it?
Yeah, it's fun. Different airplane to fly. That's for sure.
So we've heard.
Yeah.
What is the most unique part about flying this aircraft for you?
I would say the working together as a crew. I'm used to coming back flying from in a single-seat aircraft. So I'm used to doing everything myself, not having to talk to people about getting stuff done. Just do it all myself. Well, and then you fly other planes with just two pilots. Well, now I've never flown a plane where it's 3 people working together as a team. So to land this plane is pretty challenging, and we have 3 people, at key moments of the landing doing certain items. We all have to work together as a team to land safely. So I think that's the most interesting and dynamic part of flying this airplane is doing the landings.
Okay.
What is the coolest thing you've ever transported personally?
That would be, we had the capsule for Artemis 1 and the service module that's underneath it. They were mated together. NASA threw it on its side, made a little cradle, had a environmental control system around it, and we flew that. Some other pilots flew it all the way up to Mansfield, Ohio. I went up there with Ray Heineman, who's actually out here right now, and we flew up there after they finished testing and flew the spacecraft back to Kennedy Space Center. So it was pretty cool to bring that down to the Space Center, see that get put on top of a rocket, and then go around the moon. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what is the payload of this aircraft like?
Max
you can take.
Max payload's right around 50,000 pounds.
Okay.
The max that we've ever flown is that payload I talked about, and I think it was around like 48.5. And with that, we only had about 300 miles of range. So it took us 3 legs to get from Ohio to Florida.
Wow.
Because we only had enough gas to go about 300 miles.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
How far can this go with like minimum payload? Like when you flew in here?
We can do some math here. I mean, you could probably max out about 6.5 hours.
Okay.
And so it's about 1,500 miles or so.
Okay.
But it just really depends on how much load we have in the back, because we have a max takeoff weight of 170,000 and landing weight of 160,000.
Okay.
And our dry weight here is 103.
So talk to us a bit about the nose. That's a really unique aspect of this aircraft.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You've only got one hinge, right? And you've seen them open it up. We have to put different stanchions down, and and then we've got a little motor that opens the nose. We had like 22 locks they have to undo. They're the hydraulic locks. We have to detach all the engine cables, all the flight control cables, and there's a hydraulic quick disconnect. But we can do it all in about a half hour.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, we can open it, and then it usually taking off the load depending on, because they just eyeball the rails coming on up. So that they have a loader that comes up. They eyeball, make sure it's straight. I mean, sometimes they're out there with chalk and a string, making sure stuff looks straight, and then get it on there, and then they'll drag it out. We've got a winch to help push the load out onto the loader, and then vice versa to bring the stuff back on. Wow. So we can offload. Usually the offload will take about an hour and a half for offloading something, hour and a half, 2 hours. Because you got to throw an hour to open it, close the nose, and then about an hour for taking something off.
Okay.
That's a half hour if it all goes well.
Yeah,
but a lot of times, like, it's not aligned, we're going to have to back out and then realign, stuff like that.
Okay. What is the most challenging aspect of flying an airplane like this?
Landing. It's challenging because of the crosswinds.
Okay.
Crosswinds are a challenge. I mean, this thing is a huge sail, right?
Yeah.
I suppose.
It's only got 20 knots of crosswind, or that's our max limit. And if you're doing that, you're flying, wing down, top rudder, and you got a full boot of rudder in there, and your yoke is 90 degrees, and you're flying like this.
Jeez.
So you're kind of almost maxed out on flight control deflections, landing. So, and as soon as you land, it's still flying. So you got to keep the controls in there, because if you level your wings, man, you're off to the races. You're all over the place.
Sure.
And that's not fun.
I imagine it's not.
Yeah,
I've had students do that to me. It's not fun, but I assume it's less fun in this.
Yeah, you got 170,000 pounds floating around back there.
Yeah. Ooh, boy.
Well, I think that's all the questions that we've got, unless there's anything unique that you want to tell us that we haven't thought to ask you. That's my catch-all question.
Yeah. Yeah, in the late 40s, that's the airframe. But this thing was built in 83.
Okay.
Based on 1940s parts in France.
Wow.
So the first two were built by aerospace lines. Super Guppy turbine number 1, Super Guppy turbine number 2. They were built by aerospace lines about 1972 time frame. They went defunct, and so Airbus bought those two, flew them over to France, and then they flew around France all the way up till 1997, delivering Airbus parts around. They're building Airbus parts. Just kind of like the Dreamlifter out there.
Sure.
That flies around Boeing, I think 787 parts around the United States to build it. Well, in 1980, in the late 70s, early 80s, they're like, dude, we need more planes. So they got the parts and they got the designs and plans they put together. Super Guppy number 3, and this is number 4. But yeah, so this is the number 4th Guppy, and then in 1997 they came up with the Beluga aircraft to replace the Guppy, and they got rid of their other 3, and then we got number 4. We brought her home.
Okay.
So this is the only one flying. 2 of them are in museums. The other one is scrap metal. Yeah.
That's crazy. Do you have stuff fall apart all the time?
Oh, not really.
Okay. That's good.
It's well built.
Yeah.
I mean, things break. But we're NASA. I mean, we had the hinge point up there, where the whole nose opens up.
Yeah.
It was a few years back, but we found a crack in it.
Ooh.
So we need to get a new one. Nobody makes those. But we're NASA. So we went to the metal shop and we said, hey, here's the designs.
Make this.
Here's the specs. Make us one.
Yeah.
So they made us 3. So now we have 2 spares.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're NASA.
Yeah.
No, we do stuff like that.
Well, we can't thank you enough for your time. We appreciate you.
Oh, no problem.
I have a quick thank you to give, and then we'll roll on to the end of it.
Is it to me?
Yeah, thanks, Maddie. Thanks for coming.
No problem.
Well, a big thank you to both Nelson and to Brett for the opportunity to chat with them, as well as for Rob, who is with the Office of Communications with NASA, for helping to set that up for us while we were at Airventure. So really cool opportunity, wasn't it, Maddie?
Oh, it was absolutely fabulous. Wow.
And your dad was, again, we talked about it in another episode, but your dad was a real trooper as we sat up on the flight deck and he hung out down there and just BS with people and hung out next to airplanes. And
yeah, they didn't allow him up.
well, it wasn't
just him specifically, but
right, it wasn't him specifically. At that time, the flight deck wasn't open to the public, and it's not exactly like super spacious up on the flight
and
deck.
It's also not very strong, which I think was the concern. It like threw off balance. Yeah, they had a bunch of people in the flight deck, and they like exceeded the max capacity, and so it like goofed with the hinges or something. That's all I remember.
Well, hinge singular, if you remember. There's one hinge.
One hinge. What is it, like 29 bolts or something like that?
Oh, I don't. It was a lot of bolts. So maybe it's in the interview if people listen to it and want to fact check us on it. Because I don't remember off the top of my head. So lots of bolts and one hinge. To make that all happen.
So Dad wasn't allowed, but he was amazing and sat and was amazing. That is all.
He sure was. Oh, one other thing I want to cover before we go into the actual outro part. In our last episode, we said that this episode will be with Penny Levin, who works with AOPA and the Air Safety Institute as a consultant and as a psychologist. Unfortunately, we had some complications with the audio from that episode. So in trying to clean that up, we may have to either wait for a later date to publish that or re-interview Penny all over again, which she is more than happy to help us with. So she's got some great information to share. We want to get that to all of you. Just unfortunately, sometimes the technology doesn't cooperate with us when we're recording remotely. So that's why you got the NASA episode that was not to be expected until later. So we're a little out of order.
Out of sorts, just like usual.
Yeah, but I was just going to say, aren't we always out of order? You're out of order.
Is that an Office? The Office? That's got to be something from The Office.
Everything's something from The Office, isn't it? It's Michael Scott and Dwight yelling back and forth at each other. You are out of order. You are out of order.
Yes.
So there you go.
I'm so glad I remembered something. All right, for all
The
you
Office,
fans,
you are out of order. Should we talk about what's on our next episode and actually publish that one like we say we're going to?
We sure could, and we sure should.
On our next episode, we will be talking with Keith Roxo, who is with Wingman Med. If you're not familiar with them, they help all kinds of pilots navigate through the FAA medical process, whether it's a new medical diagnosis, you've got questions about like a special issuance, things like that. They're there to help keep people flying. So they will talk about their services and some important things to consider as it pertains to your medical. I think there's just a lot of, question marks for people around the medical process, deferrals, things like that. And there are so many people who go out there and try to get their medical without doing their homework. So services like Wingman Med and others are available to help get people informed before they go maybe make a mistake.
Yes, with these days and the prevalence of diagnoses, which is not a bad thing, it is almost vital to have your ducks in a row in this sense. So what they do is pretty cool.
Well, you prepare for all your other exams. Why not prepare for that one?
Well, if you guys want to be on the podcast or want to get in contact with us, you know how to find us. You guys read the show notes, right?
I hope so. Please? We put a lot of work into those. Could you read the show notes? I
can even say that I did it because I've been doing it, so... It's
on your resume, isn't it, that you are a writer with the Flying Midwest podcast?
What exactly did I... No, I need to see what I wrote.
Remember. All right, well, you think we should get out of here?
Yes.
Do you want to thank the nice people, and then we'll...
Thank you, nice people. Thank you so much for listening to the Flying Midwest podcast. We're glad you could join us for this quick little episode. And until next time... that was not coming up.
And I'm Ron Burgundy?
I'm Ron Burgundy?
That's how you said it. Until next time, I'm Ron Burgundy? That's going in there. Okay. Until next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Flight 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35. Good day.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.